The most prepared people you'll ever meet don't have a bunker. They don't have a warehouse of tactical gear or a six-figure survival setup. What they have is a shelf, maybe 2 bins under a bed, a small, quiet, completely ordinary collection of items that most people walk past in the grocery store without a second thought. And that is the part the preparedness world never talks about loudly enough. The things that actually disappear first in a real disruption aren't the expensive items. They're the cheap ones, the $1 and $2 basics that nobody thinks about until every shelf in town is empty and they're standing there wishing they had just grabbed a few extra boxes when they had the chance. Here's something worth sitting with for a moment. A person with $30 worth of the right basics already on a shelf at home is more prepared than someone who just dropped $3,000 on tactical equipment they panicked bought online and haven't touched since. That's not an opinion or an exaggeration. That's what plays out again and again in real situations. Ice storms, supply chain failures, the widespread shortages and chaos of early 2020. The basics win every single time. Now, some of you watching have been thinking about preparedness for a while. Maybe you've even started, and if that's the case, you've probably already heard of some of the items on this list. Good. That's exactly why they're here, because the gap in preparedness is almost never knowledge. Almost nobody needs a brand new piece of information to get started. What they need is a nudge, a reminder, a concrete reason to actually go pick something up this week instead of putting it off until next month. So if you already know you should have more salt or more bleach or more baking soda at home and you just haven't done it yet, let this be the thing that moves you. And if this is your first time here, even better. We're going to walk through 11 items that cost almost nothing, store easily in any home regardless of size, and quietly solve real problems that expensive gear never will. Let's start with item number 1, and it might be the single most underrated preparedness item in existence. Salt. Plain, ordinary table salt. You can buy a standard container for under $1 at nearly any grocery store. If you purchase it in bulk bags, the cost per pound drops to almost nothing. And while most households have a little salt in the kitchen, almost nobody has enough of it, because most people only think of salt as a seasoning. What they forget is that for most of human history, salt was how food survived. Before refrigeration was invented, before grocery stores existed, before reliable supply chains were even a concept, salt preserved meat and vegetables for months. You can cure jerky with it. You can brine vegetables for long-term storage. You can keep food edible without a single watt of electricity, using methods that have worked reliably for thousands of years. Salt pulls moisture out of food and creates conditions that bacteria and mold struggle to survive in. That is not a minor trick. That is the foundation of how civilizations fed themselves before modern infrastructure existed. And that's just the food angle. Salt cleans wounds. Mixed with clean water, it creates a basic saline solution you can use for wound irrigation or gargling when your throat is raw. It works as a teeth cleaning paste when toothpaste is run out. In winter, it melts ice on walkways and stairs, which matters more than people think, because a broken ankle in a situation without reliable medical access is a serious problem. Salt prevents mildew from forming on clothing stored in damp environments. It repels certain insects. It even acts as a fire retardant when applied to certain materials. Here is what really makes salt exceptional to stockpile. It does not expire. Ever. Keep it dry and sealed and it will last longer than you will. The word salary actually comes from the Latin word for salt, because Roman soldiers were, at various points in history, paid in it. Think about what that tells you about the value of salt when normal systems stop functioning. You shouldn't be grabbing one extra container. You should be putting away 20 to 30 pounds of it. At current prices, that's somewhere between $10 and $15 for a supply that will never go bad and serve over a dozen critical functions. There is genuinely no reasonable argument against it. Item number 2 is baking soda, another item that costs about $1 per box and does far more than people ever give it credit for. Most people think of it as a baking ingredient or maybe a fridge deodorizer. But in any kind of disruption, baking soda becomes one of the most versatile substances in your home. It cleans dishes with minimal water, which matters enormously when your water supply is limited or uncertain. It works as a toothpaste substitute when mixed into a paste with a little water. It neutralizes odors in small, closed spaces, and that might sound minor right now, but spend 4 or 5 days in a confined space with limited ventilation and limited sanitation, and you will understand very quickly why odor control is not a luxury, it's a basic mental health requirement. Baking soda relieves heartburn and acid reflux, which are surprisingly common when you're eating a stressed diet of stored, unfamiliar foods with limited variety. It can smother a small grease fire before it spreads, which is a real risk when you're cooking over unfamiliar or improvised heat sources. It functions as a natural pesticide in garden applications. Here's one use almost nobody thinks about. Baking soda makes an effective dry shampoo. Work it into your scalp, let it sit for a minute, then brush it out. It absorbs oil and odor without using a single drop of water. That isn't glamorous, but on day 5 or 6 without access to a proper shower, that small thing feels like genuine luxury. And in any situation where water needs to be conserved for drinking and cooking first, not using any of it on personal hygiene maintenance is a real practical advantage. Like salt, baking soda stores indefinitely in a sealed container. 20 to 30 boxes tucked under a bed or in a closet takes up very little space and gives you an almost absurd range of utility for around $30 total. Dollar for dollar, it is one of the strongest investments in preparedness you can make. Item number 3 is something most people massively understock: heavy-duty trash bags. Not the thin, flimsy kitchen variety, though you should have those as well. The ones that matter here are contractor-grade bags. Thick, black, 42-gallon bags built to handle serious weight without tearing. A box of around 30 runs about $15, which works out to less than 50 cents per bag. Here's why they matter more than almost anything else people think to buy. When power goes out for more than a day or two, garbage collection stops. Your refrigerator begins turning into a biohazard. If plumbing becomes compromised, waste management becomes an immediate, urgent problem that most people never planned for. Trash bags address all of that. They keep living spaces sanitary when normal infrastructure isn't functioning. But sanitation is only the beginning of what these bags actually do. Cut one open along the seams, and you have a waterproof ground covering for sleeping. Wear one as an emergency rain poncho. Tape one over a broken window or a vent for blackout coverage or draft blocking. Use one to collect rainwater. Line a 5-gallon bucket with one, and you have a functional emergency toilet. In cold weather, stuff one with crumpled newspaper or dry leaves, and it becomes crude but genuinely effective insulation. Use them as vapor barriers to protect stored supplies from moisture. A 50-cent bag that can keep you dry, help manage sanitation, and potentially protect you from hypothermia offers one of the best returns on investment anywhere in preparedness. You should have at least 3 or 4 boxes of contractor-grade bags stored, plus multiple boxes of standard kitchen bags for everyday waste. You will cycle through them faster than you expect when you're using them for 10 different purposes instead of one. That's the nature of multi-use supplies. They disappear faster than you planned, and you're always grateful when you have more. Item number 4 is unscented household bleach. A gallon typically costs between $4 and $6, and at that price point, it might be the most powerful emergency tool available. Here's what most people don't know. According to EPA guidelines, adding approximately 6 to 8 drops of regular, unscented bleach to a gallon of clear water, stirring it and letting it sit for 30 minutes, produces water that is safe to drink. That's it. 1 gallon of bleach can purify hundreds of gallons of drinking water. In a situation where your tap water is compromised, your stored water has been sitting too long, or you need to use water from an uncertain source, this knowledge is genuinely life-saving. Beyond water purification, bleach disinfects surfaces and tools. It sanitizes cooking implements and food preparation areas. It kills mold and mildew. It helps maintain the basic hygiene standards that prevent illness in crowded or compromised environments. When you consider that contaminated water is historically one of the leading causes of illness and death in disaster scenarios, The value of a $4 gallon of bleach becomes difficult to overstate. Keep bleach somewhere cool and dark and rotate it every year since it does degrade over time. 2 or 3 gallons gives you a solid buffer without taking up much space at all. This is not a prep for dramatic scenarios only. Ice storms and pipe breaks have a way of compromising water systems in completely ordinary circumstances. Bleach is useful long before anything dramatic happens. Item number 5 is something most people assume they already have covered. Lighters. Not 1 or 2 sitting in a drawer somewhere maybe. A multi-pack. Multiple multi-packs distributed throughout your home, your bags, and your vehicles. Fire is so fundamental that people take it for granted until they reach for it and nothing happens. A reliable flame gives you the ability to cook food, boil water, produce heat, provide light, and signal for help. These are the foundational functions of survival in nearly any scenario. Yet most households have 1 or 2 lighters in inconsistent locations, and when those run out or get lost, there's nothing behind them. A 10-pack of standard lighters runs about $8 to $10. That's less than $1 per lighter for something that can produce thousands of flames. They store indefinitely when kept dry. They don't degrade. They take up almost no space. There is no good reason not to have a meaningful supply of them spread across your home and your go bags. If you use candles for power outages or for ambiance, you're already using lighters regularly. The same logic that tells you to keep extra batteries tells you to keep extra lighters. When you need fire and you don't have a reliable way to make it, everything else on this list becomes significantly less useful. Item number 6 is bar soap. Unscented, basic, classic bar soap. Not the fancy kind. A 4-pack of standard bars costs around $3 or $4 and weighs almost nothing. In any disruption longer than a day, hygiene becomes one of the most important factors in staying healthy. Unwashed hands spread illness faster than almost anything else in a close-quarter situation. Without reliable running water, personal hygiene takes discipline and intentionality. Having soap available makes that possible. Without it, staying genuinely clean becomes nearly impossible. Bar soap doesn't pump out in a pressurized bottle that requires hand strength. It doesn't run out all at once. It doesn't break. It doesn't require batteries or electricity. It works with a minimal amount of water, which matters when you're conserving. Lather your hands with a damp bar, rub thoroughly, rinse with the smallest amount of water you can manage. That's a habit that can prevent more illness than most people realize. Beyond hand washing, soap cleans clothing in buckets and basins. It cleans tools and surfaces. It provides basic wound care by removing dirt and debris before dressing a cut. In barter situations, soap is consistently valuable because it's one of the things people need and frequently didn't think to stock. Store at least a dozen bars. They're small, lightweight, and last a very long time with moderate use. Item number 7 is duct tape. A large roll costs about $8 to $10 and gives you roughly 60 yards of fixing capability. If you've never thought of duct tape as a preparedness item, start thinking about it that way right now. In a situation where things break, duct tape buys you time. It seals gaps around windows and doors to keep out smoke, dust, or cold air. It repairs torn tarps, torn bags, torn clothing. It holds together broken equipment that you can't immediately replace. It creates splints for injuries alongside a rigid support. It seals cracks in water containers. It reinforces structural weak points in improvised shelter. The thing about repairs in a disruption is that your tolerance for imperfect solutions goes way up and your access to the right materials goes way down. Duct tape bridges that gap. It isn't the right solution for any specific problem. It's a good enough solution for almost every problem. And good enough when things are actually going wrong is far more valuable than perfect when conditions are stable. Buy 2 or 3 rolls and store them where they won't get buried and forgotten. You want to be able to find duct tape immediately when you need it, not spend 15 minutes digging through bins while something is actively going wrong. Item number 8 is candles. Plain, unscented pillar candles or long-burning emergency candles. A pack of a dozen typically runs somewhere between $8 and $12. This might seem redundant if you already have lighters and flashlights, It isn't. Here's the difference. Flashlights require batteries. When batteries die, the flashlight is done. A candle burns for hours on its own. A single candle in a small room provides enough light to read, to eat a meal, to perform basic first aid, to take care of children or elderly family members without stumbling around in the dark. Beyond practical light, candles provide warmth. A single candle produces about 80 BTUs of heat, which isn't much in a large space, but in a small, closed room, it adds up.
Multiple candles together can meaningfully raise the temperature in a confined space, which matters in cold weather when heating systems are offline. This is called candle heating, and it has been used as an emergency technique for as long as candles have existed. Candles also provide psychological comfort that is worth acknowledging seriously. Sitting in complete darkness for multiple nights in a row is hard on people. It creates anxiety. It disrupts sleep. It makes situations feel worse than they are. Light changes that. Even a small flame shifts the atmosphere of a room and helps people maintain calm and function better. Store at least 20 to 30 candles and rotate them occasionally to prevent melting or degradation in warm storage environments. Item number 9 is zip-top bags, multiple sizes, gallon, quart, and sandwich sized. A box of each typically costs between $3 and $5 and gives you around 25 to 50 bags per box. These might seem like the least impressive item on this list. They're not. Zip-top bags are waterproof, sealable, and transparent. They protect documents from moisture. They keep medications organized and dry. They separate first aid supplies by type so you can find what you need quickly under pressure. They preserve opened food packages that don't have resealable closures. They allow you to portion and ration supplies into daily amounts without contaminating the rest. Think about what happens when moisture gets into a bag of rice or flour or dried beans. You lose it. Think about what happens when your medications get jumbled together in a rushing packing situation and you can't identify which is which. You waste time and risk a mistake. Think about what happens when you have a wet environment and no way to protect your important documents, your cash, or your maps. Zip-top bags solve all of that. They also double as makeshift water carriers in a pinch. They allow you to sort and store small hardware items like screws, matches, fire starters, and batteries so they don't scatter through a bag. They keep clothing dry inside a pack that isn't fully waterproof. Store at least 2 or 3 boxes of each size. They weigh nothing, cost almost nothing, and the moment you're dealing with a real situation that has lasted more than a day, you will reach for them constantly. Item number 10 is white distilled vinegar. A gallon typically costs around $3, and gallon for gallon, it might be the most versatile liquid you can store. Vinegar is a cleaning agent, a disinfectant, a food preservative, a natural deodorizer, and a rust remover from metal tools and equipment. Mixed with water, it becomes a non-toxic surface cleaner that is safe around children and animals, which matters when you can't run to the store for another bottle of all-purpose spray. It treats minor skin irritation from insect contact. It removes hard water deposits from containers and tools. But the angle that genuinely elevates vinegar from a useful item to an essential one in preparedness is preservation. If you have a garden, or if you manage to get your hands on fresh vegetables and need to extend their life without refrigeration, pickling with vinegar is one of the oldest and most reliable preservation methods that human beings have ever used. It requires no electricity. It requires no specialized equipment beyond clean jars and lids. The results can last for months stored at room temperature. This is not a niche skill or an emergency measure. It's how people fed themselves and their families for centuries before refrigerators and modern grocery supply chains existed. Most of us have simply forgotten those skills because we haven't needed them. We have the remarkable luxury of assuming that a fully stocked store is always one short drive away. Preparedness is, in large part, about not relying entirely on that assumption. Vinegar is shelf-stable for years when kept in a cool, dark location. Store at least 5 or 6 gallons. That sounds like a lot until you're using it for cleaning, preserving food, personal care, and odor control simultaneously, at which point it moves faster than expected. And at $3 a gallon, your entire vinegar supply for a year costs less than a single fast food meal for 2 people. That cost-to-utility ratio is genuinely hard to match anywhere in preparedness. Item number 11 is the one that surprises almost everyone when they hear it. Lip balm. A single stick costs $1 to $2. It fits in a jacket pocket. It weighs essentially nothing. It feels like a comfort item rather than a preparedness item, which is exactly why most people never think to stock it. Here's why that's a mistake. Your lips are some of the most sensitive and exposed skin on your body. In any situation where you're spending more time outdoors than usual, dealing with wind, cold, dry air, smoke, dust, or any combination of environmental stress, chapped and cracked lips stop being a minor annoyance very quickly. They become open wounds on your face. In a lower hygiene environment where infection risk is elevated and access to normal medical care is reduced, any break in your skin is a legitimate concern worth preventing. Severely cracked lips make eating and drinking painful. That means you're less likely to stay properly nourished and hydrated, which compounds every other problem you're already dealing with. They bleed, they heal slowly without treatment, and all of that is entirely preventable with a $1 stick of lip balm applied a couple of times a day. Beyond lip care, most standard lip balms are essentially a combination of petroleum jelly and wax. That makes them a surprisingly effective fire-starting aid. Apply some to a cotton ball or a piece of dryer lint, and it catches a flame easily and burns for a minute or two, which is more than enough time to get kindling going when conditions are difficult. Lip balm also functions as a lubricant for small moving parts, a protective barrier over minor cuts and abrasions to keep debris out, moisture protection for exposed skin in harsh wind, and a blister preventer inside boots when applied to friction points before a long walk. Buy a couple of dozen sticks and scatter them the way you'd scatter lighters. Every bag, every jacket pocket, every vehicle, every nightstand. They're so small and inexpensive that there's no practical reason not to have them everywhere. And in a situation where comfort items carry real social value, never underestimate what a stick of lip balm means to someone whose lips have been cracked and painful for several days. People trade for things that make them feel like themselves again. That small item carries more weight than it appears to. So those are the 11 items. Salt, baking soda, heavy-duty trash bags, bleach, lighters, bar soap, duct tape, candles, zip-top bags, vinegar, lip balm. Not one of these costs more than a few dollars. None requires special training or technical knowledge to use. None takes up meaningful space, even in a small apartment, and every single one of them solves a real, tangible, practical problem that expensive gear never addresses, because expensive gear is built for dramatic scenarios, while these items are built for the reality of every disruption that actually happens. Here is the thread connecting all 11 of them. No single item on this list saves your life on its own. Preparedness is never about one magic item or one perfect plan. It is about layers. It is about having multiple cheap, simple solutions to the same core problems, so that when one thing runs out or breaks or doesn't apply to the specific situation in front of you, there's something else ready behind it. That is what genuine resilience actually looks like. Not a large single investment in dramatic gear, a broad, quiet, affordable foundation that covers the basics from a dozen different angles simultaneously. The best preparedness is the preparedness you actually do, not the plan you've been meaning to start when you have more time, more money, more space, or a better moment, the one you start this week with what you already have available to you right now. If you're not sure where to begin, start here. This week, pick up some extra salt and a box or two of baking soda. Next week, add a box of contractor bags and a gallon of bleach. The week after that, a multi-pack of lighters and a few bars of soap. Within a month, without feeling any significant financial strain from any single shopping trip, you will have a meaningful preparedness foundation that puts you ahead of the vast majority of people around you.
That is how real preparedness gets built. Not in a panic buy, not in a single expensive haul that strains your budget and burns you out. Gradually, quietly, consistently, the same way you build any solid foundation. A little at a time, on purpose, while conditions are still calm enough to think clearly. Preparedness is not about fear. It's about the specific kind of peace that comes from knowing you've handled the basics while handling them was easy. It's about being the person who doesn't need to rush to the store when everyone else does. It's about having enough margin to help a neighbor if the situation calls for it, not because you're an expert, but because you thought ahead when thinking ahead was a calm, simple option, rather than an urgent scramble. You don't need a perfect plan to start. You need an adequate one. And 11 cheap items sitting on a shelf is a whole lot more adequate than a perfect preparedness vision that never actually becomes physical reality.
If this was useful to you, hit the like button and share it with someone who's been meaning to start but keeps finding reasons to wait. Sometimes a nudge at the right moment is genuinely all it takes. This is my channel, and I make content specifically for people who want to build real, practical, affordable resilience without the drama or the expensive gear. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Drop a comment and tell me which of these 11 items you're going after first, or which ones you already have handled. Stay steady.